link as well. And well, for those that have just joined for this last day, my name is Vedran Nikolić. I work in the Nature Conservation Unit of DG Environment in the European Commission, and we are dealing with the implementation of Birds and Habitats directives. Therefore, we are here to explain the provisions today of Article 6.4, but also of the emergency regulation that came into force on acceleration of renewables. I think I will do first a general presentation of how Article 6.4 is applied, and then Stefania will focus a bit more on what changes were introduced by the emergency regulation to its application, and let Stefania actually introduce herself.
Thanks a lot, Vedran. I'm Stefania Charisiadou with this complicated Greek last name. I'm also from the same unit with Vedran, Nature Conservation Unit, and one of the files I follow is the renewable energy developments and their links to nature protection. So I will present some clarifications on the Council regulation in relation to the Birds and Habitats directives.
So actually I will start, so maybe I can immediately share my presentation. The aim today is these things can be a bit complicated, and if you're not dealing with them on a daily basis, so we'll do our best, and there will be questions obviously afterwards, but the aim is first to explain how Article 6 works in general, and then what changes came with the emergency regulation and will be coming by Renewable Energy Directive revision. But first, we think it's really important to understand how this article works and should be implemented generally, even without these changes, because they don't affect much of Article 6.4 actually. So I will share my presentation and hopefully it will work. So if you can confirm that you see it, should come full screen, no? No problems.
Now it's full screen, yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Okay, so just to refresh the memory for those who attended also yesterday when our colleague from the Czechia talked about the appropriate assessment, and last week when I talked about the screening, Article 6 contains lots of provisions, but what is important to recall for today's topic is the Article 6.3, which is about the appropriate assessment of impacts of plans and projects on Natura 2000 sites. And I will start from the results of the appropriate assessment. So as Article 6.3 says, the competent authorities can only agree and approve the plan or project after having made sure beyond any reasonable scientific doubt that it will not adversely affect the integrity of the site. And we talked about it yesterday, and we also talked about the standard, the expected standard, and the way that the appropriate assessments should be done and recorded, and so on. Then still, if the plan or project is shown in the appropriate assessment to have a significant negative effect on the site, it can still proceed under Article 6.4. But there are some important conditions and checks, and here we are talking about a certain derogation regime from Article 6.3. So this is the text of Article 6.4 with some important parts shown in bold. So if the appropriate assessment refused the plan or project because it has significant negative effects, it can still be approved if there is absence of alternative solutions. The plan or project is necessary because there are imperative reasons of overriding public interest, and compensatory measures are taken to ensure that the coherence of the network is preserved. And then in the member state, in case of application of Article 6.3, has to inform the Commission. There is a special case here where the site hosts a priority natural habitat type or species. Those are those marked with the asterisk in the annexes of the Habitats Directive. Then the only reasons for approving these projects must be those related to human health or public safety, or for the environment, protecting the environment. And if there are other reasons for which the project needs to be implemented, then in case of priority habitats or species, an opinion of the Commission is necessary. So just once again, to show this diagram of how the appropriate assessment works, we've talked about screening, about appropriate assessment, and then there are you see the questions that are basically asked in the procedure under Article 6.4. Are there alternative solutions to achieve the goals of the plan or projects? If there are alternative solutions, then again, the authorization cannot be granted. If there is no alternative, then the next question is about the imperative reasons of overriding public interest. If those exist, if they don't exist, then again, the authority should refuse the authorization. If they exist, then as I mentioned, there are a few different situations depending on the if the priority habitats or species are affected, then you may or may not need the opinion of the Commission. Now, this is the broad scheme of how Article 6.4 should be implemented, and these are the essential requirements that I wanted to again recall. The first thing to keep in mind is that the sequence of things. So Article 6.4 can be implemented only after Article 6.3 assessment has been completed. So only once a decision of the competent authority has been reached under the appropriate assessment, whether there are significant effects or not, then you could consider Article 6.4. Why? You simply cannot start assessing whether the conditions of Article 6.4 are fulfilled before 6.3 assessment is finished, because it's not possible to weigh, for example, the impacts of the project against the overriding public interest, or it's not possible to determine, for example, compensatory measures if you don't have a clarity and quantification of the negative impact. So to come back to the discussion under Article 6.3 on the significance of impact and how that should be determined, what the integrity of the site means, the outcomes of the 6.3 assessment are very important to correctly apply Article 6.4. And we can say even that if Article 6.3 has not been correctly implemented, then any outcome of Article 6.4 is also invalid, because Article 6.3 needs to be implemented in the light of site-specific conservation objectives and all these things that were mentioned a few days ago. That's one thing. So the sequence of application of Article 6.3, it comes after of Article 6.4, it comes after 6.3. Then another important thing to keep in mind that its application is not automatic. It has to be triggered. The developer, for example, would need to request the application of Article 6.4. The authorities need then to make all the checks and to decide whether they should approve or not the project. And another important thing is that this is an exception to Article 6.3. So like any other derogation or exception to the rules, this provision must be interpreted very strictly, and the conditions have to be fulfilled. So to come back again to the three requirements, first, that the alternatives have been considered, that the authorities are able to demonstrate that the alternative that we want to approve is the least damaging, that there is no other feasible alternative that would less affect the integrity of the site. That's the first condition. The other, the existence of imperative reasons of overriding public interest. And the third condition is the compensatory measures. Now, I will just briefly go through all these three conditions to explain them a bit more in detail, but not too much. First, the alternative solutions. Actually, this is the first thing that should be looked at. There is also a sequence of consideration of these conditions, And definitely the alternative solutions should be considered first. Not the overriding public interest, not compensation, because if that condition is not fulfilled, then the project must be refused. So it's useful that first the alternatives are looked at before proceeding with other considerations of other conditions. Now, what needs to be considered under alternative solutions? Well, first, it's the zero option, zero alternative, so not doing the plan or project. And this is very important because it actually entails that the authorities should confirm that the project or plan is necessary, is that it's essential, that there is no alternative to not doing it. So that sometimes is very useful because it could be the case that you could as well do without the project. So the zero option is the one to consider first. But of course, often that is not feasible alternative because you need to fulfill a certain goal, and the project is sometimes the only way to fulfill that goal. So all other feasible alternatives need to be considered that could meet the objective or the aim of the plan or project. And these alternatives are, of course, to be assessed in relation to the ecological criteria. So how they affect the maintenance of the integrity of the site and all of its ecological functions. Now, typically, you all know what especially at the project level, what the alternatives entail. If it's an infrastructure project like a road or something like that, power line, you can look at alternative locations to put it, to put a factory. You can look at alternative routes for a road. You can look at different design, putting a tunnel or bridge instead of just going through the forest, for example. These are well known to the practitioners. So, and they are also looked at in the context of other environmental impact assessments. But to state it clearly, it's also the alternatives should look into the different designs of a project or even alternative processes to get to the project aims. Another important thing is that the costs of the alternative should not be the only determining factor when you do the choice of alternative. So an alternative should not be dismissed simply because it's costly. Of course, it's all about the feasibility, both the ecological and cost, so all play a role, but it cannot be the only determining factor. And at this moment, it's useful to record all these things. So to put it in the decision, final decision on the outcome of the procedure. And in our guidance documents, we have an example of how the alternatives should be recorded. First, a description of the objectives of the plan or project, the do nothing alternative, and then all these alternatives, locations, size and scale, different means of getting to the objective should be recorded and assessed, and their effects to the Natura 2000 site described in detail before taking a conclusion on the best alternative. I put it on the slide on the side again to highlight that the objectives of a plan or project should not be analyzed only in relation to one specific technology that is employed by the proposed project, but rather in relation to achieving a certain goal. A certain project, for example, a road, can have a goal of connecting, for example, two cities, and that can be done not just through a road, it can be done sometimes through a different means, by connecting them through air or whatever. If a hydropower dam is a project, then its primary aim is to produce a certain amount of energy from renewable sources, for example, to achieve climate objectives, but then you could use other technologies as well. So it's not just assessing an alternative location to a power dam, hydropower facility. It's also looking into other alternative sources of renewable energy that could fulfill the same need for energy: wind, solar, geothermal, or others. So I think you get the point and you understand what means assessing the alternatives. Now to turn to the second condition, which is the existence of imperative reasons of overriding public interest, which is always just like the appropriate assessment on a case-by-case basis. And the things that are compared here is the objective of the particular plan or project in relation to its impact on the Natura 2000 sites. And in order to fulfill all these conditions, that these reasons are imperative of public interest and that they are overriding, one needs to examine those reasons in detail and to put them into perspective in relation to the damage that the project will cause. Imperative means that the plan or project and the reasons to implement it are really essential, and that plan or project must proceed. The overriding element means that the public interest of the project really outweighs the harm done by the project. So a little interest cannot override a huge damage. To put it in other words. And then in terms of public interest, it really must be a public benefit and public interest. It could be a private project that fulfills a public interest, but this public benefit must be proven and demonstrated. It's often the case that things which were identified in important strategies are of public interest, but it doesn't. It's not always the case. So here again, a case-by-case assessment, putting into perspective the public interest, its overriding characteristic, and in relation to the damage that will be done. Those are all the things that the authorities must weigh and record and demonstrate. Like I said, if a priority habitat or species is affected, then only certain reasons related to human health or public safety or those beneficial for environment can be used. Otherwise, an opinion of the Commission is needed. And here is the element that is actually also changed by the emergency regulation, and Stefania will talk about it later. Also, the fact that renewable projects are presumed to be of overriding public interest. That's another thing. So here are most of the changes brought about by the emergency regulation. But I will leave it for Stefania. And the third condition is the implementation of compensatory measures. Now, important to say that these measures are imposed by the authority in this procedure. They are independent of the project. So the project will have its mitigation measures. They will be part of the project. But the residual negative effects, which cannot be mitigated, those are the ones that in the end are to be compensated under Article 6.4. And like I said yesterday, compensation can only be done under Article 6.4 and not under Article 6.3. And that just brings me to one important example of bad application, or the most problematic cases that we have with application of 6.4 are the cases where the authorities were trying to let's say rig or to approve the project within the appropriate assessment, and it was clear that the impacts would be significant, or that the authorities do compensation in the framework of Article 6.3, which is not allowed. So that's maybe the most frequent example of how things should not be done. So it's clear that these compensatory measures should be additional to the actions that are required by legislation. So normal, for example, restoration of habitats, which is required by Article 6.1, should not be part of compensatory measures. These are the things that go above and beyond to compensate for the significant impact of the project or plan. And they are the last resort. This is really the last thing that should be considered when approving the project under Article 6.4. Now, this is just examples from our guidance documents on the methodological guidance of application of Article 6.3 and 4. These are first on the left, the examples of compensatory measures, which usually means recreation of habitat that would be destroyed by the project, or restoration, enhancement of the habitat in another part of the site. It's not only working with compensation measures inside the site. The compensatory measure can be a designation of a new site in the network. It can be reintroduction of species and so on. These are often need to be accompanied by some kind of actions like land purchase, creation of some rules, new rules, and reduction of pressures. Another thing which we outline in the guidance, and I will not spend much time here now, is the considerations necessary to implement compensatory measures in terms of their location, their extent, and the timing. First, on the location, this is linked to the condition that the compensatory measures should maintain the overall coherence of the network. It can be in the site, like I said, it can be designating a new site. If a new site is designated, it should be in the same biogeographical region in order to maintain the coherence of the network. It has to be the compensatory measures, in particular if there are restoration or recreation of habitats, they have to be in the place which supports that restoration, so that the ecological conditions and everything can support in the long term the restoration of the habitat. On the extent of compensation, as we explain also in our guidance, we all usually expect member states to overcompensate, so to cater for any uncertainty in particular in restoration, where it cannot be guaranteed that a certain number of hectares would actually be restored. So we require more than 1-to-1 ratio when for example, habitat is being compensated. Then on the timing, normally the effect of compensation should be in place before the project is actually implemented. But that, of course, depends on the actual measure. And we know that if compensatory measures is restoration of the habitat that needs a lot of time to be recreated, then it can be allowed that this happens somewhere in the future. But then another thing which is important is to ensure good monitoring of the implementation of compensation measures as well. All these things that I mentioned, so the identification of alternatives, you can find examples of such alternatives in our guidance documents from, for example, from opinions of the Commission that we have given. Also on determination of overriding public interest, you can also find examples. And on the compensatory measures, you can also find a lot of examples and case studies in our guidance document. And this is my last slide. All these things that I mentioned are described in detail in our guidance documents, which you can find on our webpage, and they have been translated into all languages, including Slovenian, and you can find a wealth of case studies and examples and references to the case law of the Court of Justice, which describe in detail how the Article 6.4 should be applied. And our methodological guidance in particular has a very big chapter on compensatory measures with lots of examples. And that's it. I hope this was useful as a kind of lead-in into what Stefania will present. So I don't know if you want to make a little break here with some questions for clarification, or you would prefer for us to move on to the next presentation.
Vedran, I suggest maybe to wrap up both presentations and dedicate then a larger amount of time for all the questions.
Okay, so I pass to Stefania.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I will try to share my presentation. Just a second. Do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Is it full screen or not yet? No, it's not yet. Okay, now it should come as a full screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
fine.
Great. So I will explain a few things about the Council regulation and its implications for the Birds and Habitats directives. And now my computer is not working properly. Okay, now it changed. So this presentation will provide like informal clarifications, particularly on Article 3, which is the article of overriding public interest. I actually have a few slides about Article 6 on the permit granting process. So let me know if this is also interesting for you, and I will also talk about this. So here I would like to say that these are informal clarifications for the moment, and we are developing a guidance documents, which will be also broader than the Birds and Habitats directives, covering also the impact assessment and the strategic assessment directives in relation to the Council regulation. And that should be adopted as soon as possible. So the Council regulation was adopted in December last year, and it sets new and temporary and targeted measures to accelerate the deployment of certain renewable energy projects in order to cope with the current energy crisis, as well as to reduce the dependence on Russian fossil fuels. And this regulation is directly applicable in all member states for 18 months. And the period of application is from the end of December 2022 that enter into force until the end of June 2024. Most of the provisions of this regulation have limited scope in terms of technologies and projects. For example, they are about like permitting of heat pumps and solar installations on artificial structures. But there are some articles that they have a general application and they apply to all renewable energy sources. And those are Article 3 on overriding public interest, Article 5 on repowering, and Article 6 on permit granting processes. So all permit granting processes, this regulation applies to all permit granting procedures that they have a starting date within the duration of its application, regardless of their end dates, but also to ongoing processes which have not resulted in a final decision before they enter into force. My computer does not cooperate very well. Yes, it moved. Okay, so I will quickly read Article 3 of overriding public interest because it's a bit complicated. So Article 3 establishes that the planning, construction, and operation of plants and installations for the production of energy from renewable energy sources, their connection to the grid, the related grid itself, and the storage assets shall be presumed as being in the overriding public interest and serving public health and safety when balancing legal interests in the individual cases for the purposes of the derogation articles of the Habitats Directives, the Water Framework Directive, and the Birds Directive. Member states may restrict the application of these provisions to certain parts of their territory, as well as to certain types of technologies and projects, as long as these restrictions are in accordance with the priorities set in their integrated national energy and climate plans. The second paragraph of the article establishes that member states shall ensure that at least for projects which are recognized as being of overriding public interest, not presumed, but are recognized, the planning and the permit granting process, the construction and operation of energy plants, and the related grid infrastructure is given priority when balancing legal interests in the individual case. Concerning species protection, the preceding sentence shall only apply if and to the extent that appropriate species conservation measures contributing to the maintenance or restoration of the population of the species at favorable conservation status are undertaken and sufficient financial resources as well as areas are made available. Yes, this is it. So Article 3 basically establishes a rebuttable presumption that renewable energy projects are of overriding public interest and serve public health and safety in order to benefit from the derogations in the Birds and Habitats Directives and the Water Framework Directive. So basically this presumption shifts the burden of proof to the benefit of the projects. And for this reason, the granting authority does not need to demonstrate that this project is in public interest or serves public health or the interests override the conflicting environmental interests for the various derogation articles. So here I would like to emphasize that this concerns only those certain conditions of the derogations. So basically, the authorities still bear the burden of proof for all the rest that Vedran explained before. For example, the no alternative solution and the compensation measures, according to Article 6.4. So I just said that this is a rebuttable presumption. So this means that not all renewable energy projects will always be considered of overriding public interest, and there is still a need for a case-by-case assessment. So as an example, and also recital 8 of the regulation makes this clear, if there is clear evidence of major adverse effects of a project on the environment, and in particular, for example, on Natura 2000 sites, which is assessed as greater than the anticipated benefits in terms of energy production that this particular project would have, then this is a good example of a project that the overriding public interest should be rebutted. So when it comes to implications for Article 6.3 and 6.4 of the Habitats Directive, the regulation does not change the provisions or the interpretation of Article 6.3 or 6.4 of the Habitats Directive. So all our guidance documents, as Vedran explained before, they remain applicable. However, there is a differentiation, and this is about Article 6.4. So the regulation establishes the presumption that renewable energy serve public health and safety. And then therefore, in cases where we rely on Article 6.4, and the project is assessed as having a significant impact on priority habitats or species in a Natura 2000, then these projects can be authorized without the need for a Commission opinion. Of course, the need for a notification to the Commission still applies, but there is no need for a Commission opinion for this. So when it comes now to species protection, as you know, Article 5 of the Birds Directive and Article 12 of the Habitats Directive, they establish the requirement for member states to take appropriate measures to establish a system of strict protection. And then we have Article 9 of the Birds Directive and Article 16 of the Habitats Directive that they establish derogations from these species protections. So here again, as with Article 6.3 and 6.4 of the Habitats Directive, the regulation does not amend these provisions, but only presumes that these projects are of overriding public interests. So in species protection, I would also like to clarify that in the Repower EU plan and communication, we made clear that in cases that when occasional killing or disturbance occur would not be considered deliberable, and therefore no derogations would be required if the projects adopt appropriate mitigation measures during construction and operation, and if these are properly monitored to assess their effectiveness, and further measures are taken as required. So in these cases, then derogations would not be even needed to be granted. So that was Article 3, I think. And I have a few slides for Article 6, but you let me know if you would like me to go through this or not.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Article 6 then, which is another complicated one. It's about the permit granting process. And this article establishes that member states may exempt renewable energy projects, as well as energy storage projects, grid projects, which are necessary to integrate renewables into the system, from the environmental impact assessment and from species protection assessments under Article 12 of the Habitats Directive and Article 5 of the Birds Directive, provided that the project is located in a dedicated renewable or grid area, and if the member states has set any such area, and that the area has been subject to a strategic environmental assessment, the competent authority shall ensure that on the basis of existing data, appropriate and proportionate mitigation measures are applied in order to ensure compliance with the species protection provisions of the Birds and Habitats Directives. And in cases that those measures are not available, the competent authority shall ensure that the operator pays monetary compensation for species protection programs. So basically, Article 6 is an optional article, so member states may or may not opt for its application, and it does cover all renewable energy projects, storage assets, and grids. And it establishes certain exceptions from environmental impact assessments and the species protection assessments if two circumstances are cumulatively met. And this is that there is a dedicated renewable or grid area, and that the plan to designate this area has been subject to a strategic environmental assessment. So these two conditions have to both apply in order to rely on Article 6 application. So again, Article 6 of the regulation does not provide for any exception from Article 6.3 and the need for an appropriate assessments under the Habitats Directive if this is so required, as Vedran explained. And in cases that member states would like to opt for the application of Article 6 and these exceptions, then appropriate and proportionate mitigation measures must be applied in order to ensure compliance with the species protection provisions according to the Birds and Habitats Directive on the basis of existing data. So in exceptional cases that mitigation measures are not available, as we explained in the last slides about Article 3 previously, then we have to rely on derogations. And then the operator has to pay a monetary compensation for species protection programs in order to secure or improve the conservation status of those species affected. So this monetary compensation is actually a new concept that doesn't exist in the birds in the nature directives so far. So it's totally new for us and for you. And in my last slides, I will just try to explain that what we think for the moment could be some conditions to properly apply this monetary compensation. So for example, member states should put in place a system to evaluate and monetize the damage caused to the affected species and calculate the amount that would be needed to compensate for this damage. Then the project developer should contribute financially for the implementation of these species protection programs. And here the article leaves some flexibility. So this could be implemented by the developers themselves or by another body, for example, the Nature Conservation Authority. Also, the member states should put in place an appropriate enforcement mechanism to ensure that the operator does pay this compensation. and also to monitor the implementation and effectiveness of this system and to take further measures if they are necessary. So I think that was all. Yes, that was it. So I hope I answered some of the many questions that you may have. So please let us know if you have further questions.
Thank you, Stefania and Vedran, both. I think we are all eager to start the discussion, and I already see some hands raising. I think Vesna is the first one. So Vesna, please go ahead and open the discussion.
First, thank you to both for your really conceptual and precise presentation. I have a question for Stefania, and we wonder if there are any cases already on monetization and calculation of these measures, because we don't have the case on program, but anyway, is there any possibility after there will be some also to share these cases with member states among because this is really new system. We know that the evaluation of biodiversity has we have many evaluation system, how to count them, and many different economic approaches. So it will be interesting to see a specific one when it will be. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this question. Yeah, actually, this is a very challenging part of this regulation. I don't know if you know, but that we sent a letter to our expert group, to NADEC, some time ago, and we explicitly asked if there are examples to share. So from this call, only one member state replied. This is Germany. So far, what we know is that only Germany is aiming to apply this system. And I think we will upload this letter in Circa BC, but so far we have not really yet assessed or really understood well how Germany is going to apply this.
Thank you.
But so far, that's it.
Okay, if that's it from Vesna's side, I would ask the other participants and invite them to also put forward their own questions.
Jaz imam eno pripombo pa eno vprašanje.
Okay.
Pa bom kar v slovenščini, da ne bo preveč zakompliciran.
Okay, and I'll try to translate.
Ja, in sicer na enem od slajdov je bilo omenjeno, da pač je lahko alternativa za hidroelektrarne tudi drug vir izrabe energije, vetrne ali pa sončne recimo, ne? In je bilo navedeno, da pač megavati so tisti, ki jih nadomeščamo. S tem bi pač opozorila, da to se ne da tako poenostaviti, ne? Ker za elektroenergetski sistem megavati niso edini odločujoči faktor. Ve se, da v elektroenergetskem sistemu imajo hidroelektrarne s pasovnim obratovanjem predvsem čisto drugo vlogo, ne, in jih ne moremo nadomestiti z drugimi obnovljivimi viri. Ampak celo obratno, več, ko imamo recimo vetrnih in sončnih, več rabimo hidro, da to lahko kompenziramo in da sistem sploh deluje. Če pa bi recimo šlo za prevlado v primeru kakšne črpalne hidroelektrarne, pa sploh ne moremo z ničemer drugim nadomestiti, ker gre v bistvu za hranilnik energije. Vemo pa, da baterije trenutno še niso toliko močne in toliko reagibilne, da bi to lahko nadomestili. Se pravi, ne moramo gledati samo megavatov, ampak vlogo, ki jo v sistemu določen vir pač vrši, to je pač moja pripomba. Moje vprašanje se pa nanaša na to, da če mora biti 6.3 zaključeno, se pravi, to pomeni, da mora biti izdana odločba, da poseg ni sprejemljivo, ne. Kjer smo mi tukaj videli pač zadržati ali vprašanje po smislu, pa me zanima, če je zdaj samo slovenska interpretacija zakonodaje taka, ali je povsod po Evropi na ta način, da pred izdajo odločbe mora biti upravljena javna razgrnitev in pogovor z javnostjo. Se pravi, da mi dejansko javnost vključimo v fazi in ji kažemo neizvedljiv projekt. Ne? S tem javnost samo vznemirjamo, rešitve pa v bistvu še niso znane. A ne bi bilo smiselno, da se ta javnost vključi potem, ko je že izdana negativna odločba in so pač že se ve, kakšni bodo te izravnalni ukrepi in je cel projekt pač bolj znan, se pravi pred odločitvijo o prevladi, ne da je javnost vključena pred izdajo negativne odločbe.
Okay, so I'll try to summarize the question for our speakers. So first, it was a comment that you mentioned that the alternative, for example, for hydro power plants could be other renewable energy sources, and that the alternative in terms of megawatts is the key. The comment from the physical participant here in the room was that they see it otherwise, because the solar power plants, in their opinion, cannot replace the hydro due to the stability and due to other characteristics. So the alternative should rather be looked at from the perspective of the role, not of the pure power that they are generating. That's the comment. Now the question is, so there was, you mentioned that the involvement of the public happens before there is a negative assessment made in the 6.3. And the question here is, wouldn't it make more sense to include the public and involve them in the discussions after you already know that the assessment is negative and after you already found the compensatory measures from the 6.4? So that would be the summary. And maybe for you to comment on, Vedran and Stefania.
I can give it a try. So first on the comment, it was the example that I mentioned. So if the goal of the project is to provide certain amount of energy, you should look at other renewable sources, hydropower versus solar and wind. I understand that it's not just about the amount of power, it's also about the feasibility in relation to other things. But the point here is that the absence of alternatives needs to be demonstrated and underpinned by the authority. So a mere statement that this is not compatible, with the grid or whatever is not sufficient. One would need really to explain and substantiate why it is not feasible to replace, 5 megawatts of hydropower with 5 megawatts of solar. It's not just about merely making a statement that it's not just about the power. One needs to prove and explain, and just to know that many countries don't have hydropower. They don't have rivers that can be harnessed, so they rely in their systems on renewables from other sources, be it wind, solar, or ocean energy. So it's also about proving why the system cannot be tweaked or changed to accommodate that change. So it's not. My point is that it's not just a mere statement that needs to be proven, underpinned in relation to be accepted under Article 6.4. And then it's about other conditions. Okay, overriding public interest, like Stefania said, it's a bit easier to implement now, but the compensatory measures are not always possible. So it's finally about fulfilling all three conditions in relation to a certain project. And it shouldn't be one shouldn't wait until individual projects are implemented to start addressing the challenges. And that's just to come back to what I said in one of these previous presentations. The strategic planning, in the particular of renewables, is the best way to avoid conflicts at the project stage. So planning from the outset, what are the possibilities for a different energy mix between solar, wind, and hydropower on a strategic scale, national scale, to fulfill the targets, and how that relates to the feasibility with regards to the nature protection is the best way not to get stuck into the individual projects and these types of issues. So I think that's just a comment on the comment. And on the question on the public participation, I'm not sure that I got it completely, but the public should be involved in all stages and procedures. So in 6.3 and 6.4 as well. As you know, the Aarhus Convention on the public participation and access to justice applies to all decisions related to the environment. So the public would normally be involved both in the appropriate assessment, but also in the approval of the project under Article 6.4. The exact moment where the authority decides to consult the public should be decided by the authority. It should be, of course, the most useful moment, but that flexibility is left to the authorities. I don't know how it's done in Slovenia, but all public, in particular NGOs, as we have rulings from the Court of Justice, have both the right to participate and to challenge the decisions of the authorities. So if that's not the case in Slovenia, you will need to adapt the practice.
Vesna, maybe you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Thank you also for this answer. I will just explain that it's a practice that we have one-stop shop. We have joint procedure according to Environmental Impact Assessment Directive and Habitat Assessment. So we have 6.3 related to EA. So we need a public involvement, and we have it in our National Environmental Act. So this is obligation. So it must be from time to time, if happened that it's negative from 6.3. Yes, it's situation that it's not nice to present to the public, but we have to. Yeah, in next stage, in 6.4, the public is not obligatory, but until the one according to the law, because the Habitat Directive doesn't have obligation for this. This is a technical procedure, but in the only case we had in Mokrice, we opened to the public and also open to all 69 NGOs. And even we invited them so that it will be open. Okay, there are some consequences out of it, but yeah, for now, we have fulfilled both directives.
But just to clarify that the obligation to consult the public indeed doesn't come from the Habitats Directive, which was adopted before the Aarhus Convention. It comes from the Aarhus Convention, to which EU and member states are signatory, which grants this right to the public. And later it was, of course, built into EU legislation that was adopted after the Aarhus Convention. But member states really are bound to this also by the rulings of the European Court to allow to consult the public and allow access to justice. And that relates, by the way, also to the screening and other things.
Yeah, but by the way, for screening, we also have involved. This was a change after 2014. So the public is completely inside. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if we have other participants who would like to put forward their questions. Anyone from the call? Huh? See Daniel raising hand.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the discussion. I have a very simple question. I guess it is for Vedran. How many cases do we have of procedure 6.4 for plans? Thank you.
Yes, we have indeed very few cases of applying 6.4 to plans. We know from the Commission opinions, we have issued just a few on the plans. And for the notifications, I'm not sure because we receive many notifications. We would have to look into them. I assume also there would not be so many. And there's there's probably a reason behind this, because the plans are not always at the appropriate level that would enable the Article 6.4 to be applied. Typically, where Article 6.4 could be applied, it's some kind of urban planning and something which concerns plans with lots of details about the location and technology behind the individual projects which are in the plan, because only then you can identify in the appropriate assessment the exact effects, and then you can apply 6.4 in terms of compensation and so on. It's difficult to imagine application of Article 6.4 on the plans which are made on a very general level without exact locations and without much details about all the individual projects which are contained in the plan. That's inherent to the procedure. Article 6.3 and 4 can only be useful as compared to the level of detail of the plan, because sometimes the only thing that can be said when assessing the plan is the risk that the plan entails for certain Natura 2000 sites, and then the mitigation measure applied is often to address that risk at the lower level, at the level of the projects, because that still needs to be done. Appropriate assessment needs to be done, nevertheless, at the level of each project which is contained in the plan. But that also means that the appropriate assessment can give only a useful input to the plan if the plan is really made with a view to provide this feedback for individual projects. So the authority and the developer of the plan would receive useful information only if they have put the required level of detail in the plan. If not, that chance has been missed to address the issue strategically and to look at the cumulative impacts and so on. And that means there's a higher risk that at the project level, you may have issues which could not have been considered at the planning level. That's the fact, and we, from our experience and as we describe in our guidance, we have found both good examples of how planning was used to address the impacts on the sites and to already consider at the strategic environmental assessment level the alternatives, so that the risk of negative effect on the sites is minimized, but both also examples where this chance has been missed and this assessment has been cascaded down to the individual projects level, where it's much more difficult to have this broader strategic view. So that's the answer. We have very few applications of Article 6.4. I think exactly because the appropriate assessment at that level often cannot give a very useful output.
Can I follow up on the comment?
Yeah.
Thank you. So in fact, you're saying that it's not possible to use 6.4 procedure for example, NECPs, because also the structure of the NECPs is prescribed by the EU regulation, and as a fact, there are no locations. So without that kind of granularity of information, it's not possible to do, let's say, a comprehensive appropriate assessment. And in that manner, it is not possible even to do 6.4 procedure. Thank you.
Well, one would have to look into each plan, but I would say that for certain the alternatives, that's the right place. They could be considered probably at the level of the plan. The overriding public interest could be considered. Where the part where I find it most difficult to have 6.4 applied is the compensatory measures, because at that level, I don't know, I cannot imagine, I don't know what's the content of those plans, but without good quantification of the significant negative effects, you cannot really create suitable compensatory measures. So I think that would be the biggest challenge, the creation and implementation of compensatory measures at that level. But anyway, I think the compensatory measures are meant primarily for the project level. So I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's an interesting point, which we don't have experience so far at the EU level, I think, of any country applying Article 6.4 procedure at the level of such plan. I would even think it impossible that at the planning level you wouldn't be able to find alternatives, because that's the first check that would have to be done. Is there an alternative to that plan? There should always be an alternative to reach the climate goals in some way. And the best way to do it is really to consider it at the planning level. So my question, if I would reverse it, is why would you think that it would be easy to prove at the planning level that there is no alternative to a certain plan, which entails different renewable energy projects and mix? So there's always possibility, like I said, to shift certain renewable energy production from the most damaging technologies to the less damaging. First, as the Repower EU actually requests, to look at energy saving, then to look at the space on roofs for the solar and brownfields, and then to look at the projects which will be implemented in new places. So I think that would be the most challenging thing, to prove the absence of alternatives at such a broad planning level. That's my opinion.
I thank you. So we don't have any cases of 6.4 regarding NCPs, and also we don't have any cases of 6.4 regarding any renewable energy planning, if I understand it correctly. Thank you.
Not that I know of in the Commission opinions, and I don't think among the notifications either. We can look into this and provide you some feedback. I think it could be interesting for others as well. I think the energy plans in the past were not required and not implemented by member states on such level. So maybe that's one of the reasons why it was not considered in the past. I mean, from the start of application of the directive.
Okay. We have another participant that would like to put a question forward. Matjaž, feel free to go ahead.
Hello from my side. Hi to everybody. I think that this discussion is very good. I think that we have maybe explained a little bit the what's happening in behind. We are facing in the new NSP. We are facing with the lack of energy, or with the intention to expand the production of energy from hydropower. But on the other hand, we know that we don't have enough resources, or that we are in the way that we will face the overriding public to go to overriding public interest over nature. So here I think that it's most important to find out and to discuss all the alternatives, like Vedran explains. So and on the other side, maybe just to warn that in the future, if we intend to make some new hydropower plants on Sava River, that maybe we will need to face the overriding public interest. So I think that on the level of the plan, we cannot do anything more than to discuss the alternatives.
Yeah, Matjaž, thank you for putting forward your perspective on this one. Maybe Vesna, I saw you raising hand. Did you want to comment on that one directly?
Yes, directly. This is a very interesting topics because we have one court case. I imagine that our judges also have the same seminars in at the Commission. So we had a court case on operational program for renewables. At this time, renewables are the most challenging issues. Nothing is more difficult than renewables, what we didn't expect, but it's so. Our core decision was different. that they ask that on the level of operational program, the pre-at assessment is so precise that overriding public interest must be implemented there. So we are now asking ourselves how to deal with national energy climate plan in such a case. And yeah, on one side we have this court case on the same level for operational program. Operational program previous was annulled by the court because one NGO has an opinion that something inside should be overriding. So how somehow we can manage these situations.
Well, I'm not familiar with the details of that case, but I think the development of renewables in synergy with nature is everybody's common aim. I don't think that anybody, well, in room in Ljubljana or here online, would advocate for developing of renewables that would destroy irreversibly nature, because we know that healthy nature is also needed to fight climate change. So we would be undermining the main goal that we have set is to fight climate change also through improving the condition of nature, through restoring nature. So indeed, if the plan is the best way to consider these things, I'm still convinced that at the planning level you can find the good solution which would keep both. If you already know that developing hydropower on Slovenian rivers would lead to projects being subject to Article 6.4, and many of them, why would you not consider at the planning level really the true and feasible alternatives to developing hydropower in the country? Because it's not only about the Habitats Directive, it's about the Water Framework Directive goals, it's about keeping rivers free flowing. So indeed, if there is a good alternative to be done in a country like Slovenia, which doesn't have huge energy demands and that hasn't exploited fully the wind potential and especially solar, including on the roofs, that's the best place to consider changing the direction and doing things in a much more sustainable way, even if it entails changing a bit the system of generating and storing electricity in the country, because that in the long term that would really help achieve the climate goals, the nature legislation goals, and the needs of the society. So, and that's the way why this project implemented by the colleagues has set out to map the risk and to map sensitivity of certain areas, but starting also from the potential to develop wind and other renewables and matching it with the risk of damaging nature. So to find really with concrete data and with the best knowledge that we have today, if there are areas where renewables can be developed to satisfy energy needs without going through to damaging the most valuable natural sites that we have. So I think there's many unknowns still for you to say in the climate and energy plan what is the best alternative, and this project would bring some answers to those open questions, and there may be need to do more work, and the plans can always be amended. So I think no country has done this overnight, and the fact that we are now in the energy crisis doesn't help, because countries are trying to do in 1 year what they didn't do in 10 years. So that's the big challenge, and some things you just cannot do overnight. But I think things should not be easily dismissed, because I'm convinced that these two things can be reconciled even in Slovenia.
Great. Vesna, probably no follow-up from your side, as I see.
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Ali imamo morda še kakšno vprašanje iz strani udeležencev, tudi lahko v slovenščini, bomo prevedli. So any questions still in the audience to what we heard today from Vedran or Stefania? No further questions, it seems. Okay. Good. Seems like we don't have any further questions. I would really like to thank Stefania and Vedran for sharing this knowledge with us. With this, we will close the discussion and session that was just presented. Se pravi, and I'll switch back to Slovene now. Sorry, Vedran and Stefania, since we will continue with the following sessions in Slovene. So once again, thank you. Kar se tiče nadaljevanja.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Ja.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thanks, and good luck with the rest.
Thank you, Vedran. Kar se tiče nadaljevanja, bomo zdaj imeli pauzo, sicer do 14. Ob 14. pa nadaljujemo z naslednjim predavanjem, in sicer na temo umeščanja sončnih elektrarn na kulturno dediščino. To bo pa vodil gospod Gorazd Živković, ki se nam bo tudi pridružil. Torej, krajša pauza in ob 14. nadaljujemo.